Finally, the Deadmines Mini-Set is upon us, which is great because the game has been pretty stale lately, and Mercenaries is pretty terrible. So let's start by looking at Need for Greed, a Demon Hunter spell. 5 mana with tradable, draw 3 cards. If drawn this turn, this costs 3. So even at its worst, 5 mana draw 3 is like pretty okay. At its best, 3 mana draw 3 is of course very good. And the if you draw it this turn thing works pretty well with the tradable, because if it gets stuck in your hand, you can just trade it and then try to top deck it later, which is always nice. And tradable cards in general just tend to be pretty strong. So yeah, seems like a solid card, but I'm not sure how easy it'll be to find room for it. I think if you're just playing like a Death Rattle Demon Hunter or some sort of Illidari Inquisitor deck or something, it seems like this card doesn't compare that favorably to Skull of Gul'dan. Skull is just the better expensive draw 3 thing. But I could see this finding a home in Quest Demon Hunter, because it just cares so much about cheap card draw. I do think that something that draws 3 could be pretty strong in this deck, because aside from Glide, I think everything else only draws 1 or 2, so drawing 3 is pretty nice. If you happen to top deck this on turn 3, you can just play it and that completes the first part of the quest line, that's cool. After that, you can also pair it with just like a Sigil of Alacrity or just your Persistent Peddler trade, and that can complete the quest without needing to have like Sigil of Alacrity and a Spectral Sight and, you know, a double jump. It's just fewer cards necessary to complete the quest, so that could be good. The only real problem is finding what we cut for it. I think we can pretty easily cut this Rustrot Viper, just swap out tradable cards, and I think the Need for Greed is just a better card in general when you're not trading it. But I'm not sure about where we're finding the second slot. Maybe we just cut another tradable card, the Guild Trader. I don't think we can really replace like Acrobatics, because this card draws 4 cards in the late game instead of 3. And then all the other card draw is like so much less expensive. I don't think it makes sense to cut that stuff. But yeah, Need for Greed could very easily cut out some of the top end, some of the tradable cards we already play. So yeah, seems like a solid card. Next we have another solid card, Crow's Nest Lookout, 3 mana 2/2 demon with Battle Cry. Deal 2 damage to the left and rightmost enemy minions, once again for Demon Hunter. So yeah, I mean, this is a pretty solid card. 3 mana 2/2 deals 4 damage to minions. In theory, this is very efficient. I just feel like in practice, maybe this isn't going to be that powerful. For one, if your opponent's playing a lot of minions, it's pretty easy to play around this card, because there's not really any other positioning stuff to worry about, so you just throw stuff in the middle if it needs to be protected. But even if they don't really play around it, say you're up against like aggro Druid, which is probably the biggest aggro deck right now, just like none of their stuff even dies to this 2 damage. So you deal like 2 to an Oracle of Elune and 2 to a Bone Chewer Brawler, and that's just not very exciting, right? And I don't even really know what deck you would be able to play this in. Like, you're definitely not playing it in something combo heavy like the quest decks. I don't think you can really play it in a Death Rattle Demon Hunter deck either. Just seems kind of hard to find a deck slot for it, and even when you do find the deck slot, it's probably not that powerful unless there's a Flame Imp meta. Moving on to Druid, we have Druid of the Reef. 1 mana 1/1 with choose 1. Transform into a 3/1 shark with Rush, or a 1/3 turtle with Taunt. So this card's just straight up really good. Either of the options on this are fine. It's kind of like Holy Smite or Voidwalker, both of which have seen play. There's already an aggro Druid deck that's pretty interested in this. It has synergy with Oracle of Elune. I think aggro Taunt Druid for sure plays this, but I could even see slower Druid decks playing this as well. I assume the things it turns into are beasts, but the 1/1 body itself is not a beast, so even if you're playing like a Guardian Animals deck, that's fine. And even if you're playing maybe like a Celestial Alignment deck, this is still just 1 mana deal 3 damage, or 1 mana block 3 damage or something like that. So just seems like a really solid all-around Druid card. Probably is considered in most decks. So moving on to Hunter, we have Monstrous Parrot, 4 mana 3/4 beast with Battlecry, repeat the last friendly death rattle that triggered. So a couple things to be clear on. It doesn't say triggered this turn, it's just triggered in general. So that makes this card much easier to use. And also it's just Battlecry repeat that death rattle, not like Battlecry gain that death rattle. So it's a relatively fast effect. You do actually have to have the death rattle trigger though. So if you play turn 3 Bloated Python, and your opponent just ignores it and doesn't play a minion, say they're like, you know, Quest Mage or something that just doesn't play minions, then you won't be able to use the Monstrous Parrot. But if they do kill it, or if they give you something to trade into, then you're going to have the 4/4 from the Python, the 3/4 Monstrous Parrot, which is then going to immediately make another 4/4. So very powerful card under the right circumstances. Potentially also good with Zixor. Maybe it's a nice way to get another Rat King. How does this actually work with Rat King? I guess the parrot would go dormant, and then it would wake up as a Rat King. I don't know, that doesn't seem great. But yeah, obviously it's good with expensive stuff like Teacher's Pet, Dark Moon Tonk. I think in general you'd probably like to have cheap death rattles for it, just so you can play it on or near curve. Maybe something like Nerubian Egg, and then you curve Nerubian Egg into the Mount card to have a bit of a threat on it. Definitely insane if you get super late game with like Plagued Proto-Drake or Scrapyard Colossus. Very strong effect. I just think in general, like this doesn't just go in Face Hunter, it doesn't go in Quest Hunter. I don't really think that the Death Rattle support all around is there to like really make me want to play a Death Rattle Hunter deck. But it's definitely a powerful effect. It doesn't take that much for this card to see play. And when it does see play, it could be anywhere from solid support card to like a deck defining card. So pretty cool bird. Next for Hunter, we have Defias Blastfisher, 5 mana 3/2 pirate. There are a lot of pirates in this set. With Battlecry, deal 2 damage to a random enemy, repeat for each of your beasts. So in theory, you have 6 beasts in play. This can deal 14 damage. That's obviously a lot of damage for a 5 mana card. But in standard, at least, we don't really have like an Unleash the Hound that you could easily combo this with. But if you're already playing a deck that has just like Rodent Nest and maybe Scent Finder, maybe you play Rats of Extraordinary Size, this is a pretty easy card to just throw in that deck. I think you're probably not playing it in Face Hunter. I think you have better ways to deal damage, and even though you do play like Adorable Infestation, you play Wolpertinger, you play a few other things that can make beasts, I think it's not that likely that you'll have more than a couple beasts in play. And if you only have 1 beast in play, this card is just bad. Even if you have 2, it's like kind of expensive for what it does. And I think that's the biggest problem. Obviously, if this was like a 2 mana 1/1, it would be insane. But at 5 mana, it's just hard to combo. And I don't think it's that likely that it'll be good on curve. But cool card. If you're already playing a bunch of token stuff, probably makes the cut. Although, I guess I will say, if you're playing a lot of token stuff, it probably makes you want to play Rat King. And if you're playing Rat King, I feel like your deck might be more tailored to like consistent value, because that's what the Rat King does. It gives you consistent value. And maybe you're playing like Guardian Animals or Jewel of N'Zoth or something. And in that sort of deck, then the Defias Blastfisher, just like a damage card, isn't even necessarily what you want, but it's okay. Moving on to Mage, we have another Parrot, the Grey Sage Parrot. 8 mana 6/6 beast with Battlecry, repeat the last spell you've cast that costs 5 or more. So, like the other Parrot, it doesn't say the last big spell you cast this turn, it's just the last big spell you cast in general. So, what are the big spells Mage has access to? Apexis Blast, obviously you're not playing Minion plus Apexis Blast in the same deck. Refreshing Spring Water makes a little more sense, but generally Spring Water you do want to be playing in a deck that doesn't play that many minions, so it doesn't make too much sense to play the Parrot. And like, even if you hit this with the Parrot, is it that good? 8 mana 6/6, draw 2 cards. I mean, I guess if you refresh 4 mana, then 4 mana 6/6, draw 2, that is pretty good. But it doesn't seem like they make too much sense in the same deck list. Flame Strike is pretty good off this, but what meta are you playing in? We're playing back-to-back Flame Strikes is actually winning the game. Deep Freeze is just kind of solid, but again, it's just like a value thing. Grand Finale probably makes more sense than Deep Freeze, just because it's like a big chain of threats. There's already like a semi-viable-ish Grand Finale deck that plays Hot Streak to ramp out the Grand Finale, so maybe you do that on like turn 6, and then you can coin out the Parrot and get more elementals. But if you're doing that, you do need to play more elementals to actually get a bunch of value out of the Grand Finale. Otherwise, you're just playing like 8 mana 6/6, making 8/8, which is fine, but not incredible. I think probably the best thing that this has going for it is going to be Mask of Cthulhu. You can just play a deck that sort of plays for Mask of Cthulhu, and turns out that just playing like a bunch of masks in a row is pretty hard for the opponent to deal with because it cleans up their board and does chip damage every time. But even in that case, kind of feels like you'd rather just play Quest Mage, get the spell damage, kill with Ignite. I just don't really see what the Parrot is doing at the moment. They did show another big expensive spell that I'll probably look at in the next video, but it also just doesn't really seem like it makes too much sense with the Parrot. I don't know, I'm a little stumped on this card. I first saw this, and then I saw the Clumsy Courier, and I was like, surely they'll print some big expensive spell that makes sense with these cards. But so far we just haven't really seen that spell. Maybe the last Mage card to be revealed is another puzzle box of Yogg-Saron or something. Moving on to Paladin with yet another Parrot. We've got the Sunwing Squawker. 4 mana 3/4 beast with Battlecry. Repeat the last spell you've cast on a friendly minion on this. So once again, doesn't have to be a spell cast this turn, just cast in general. So I think the big ones that Paladin has access to are Blessing of Authority. So this would be, what, a 4 mana 11/12. Pretty sick. And kind of gets rid of the drawback on Blessing of Authority since you couldn't attack this turn anyway. I do think with like Blessing of Authority though, like maybe you'd be better off just playing oh, I have the word spell typed in. Like maybe in that case you're better off just playing Argent Braggart. It does kind of the same thing, but less mana. But with the Squawker, you can also take advantage of Libram of Hope. You do have to cast the Libram of Hope on one of your minions, but that's something you can pretty easily do in a lot of matchups. And then you play the Squawker, and it basically just makes another 8/8 Taunt Divine Shield, so pretty powerful. But I think with something like this, you're probably generally more concerned about the cheaper spells you can be using, because if you care about the expensive stuff, then you can play like Lady Liadrin for even more value. Although the Squawker definitely is faster. But looking at the cheaper spells Paladin has, there are some pretty good options there too. We've of course got Hand of Adal, which is just a good card. This card is pretty good with Libram of Wisdom. Just get an extra copy of Wisdom that you can play every turn. And you kind of already want to be playing this in your Libram of Hope deck anyway, right? So makes some sense there. There's also Noble Mount, which looks particularly strong. Turns this into 4 mana 4/5 Divine Shield, Death Rattle, make a 1/1 Divine Shield. So that's a pretty damn good Chillwind Yeti. And then I think the final card of note is like Blessing of Kings. If you could go like coin Blessing of Kings into Squawker on 4, That would be pretty insane as well. So yeah, a lot of pretty good stuff the Sunwing Squawker can do. It actually seems like it could just pretty easily slot into a Libram deck. And then maybe you like slightly tailor your Libram deck to this card, include like Blessing of Authority and Argent Braggart, which I don't think are popular at the moment, but maybe they are. I think this could probably even go into a like a Divine Shield deck that plays like Prismatic Lens, right? Just because it's so strong with Noble Mount, and I think that deck already plays Hand of Adal as well. So yeah, it seems like a Paladin card that definitely could see some play. And this is also just a cool card in general because, like, there's not really anything super cool that we can do with it at the moment. It's mostly just stats, but there's a lot of room for them to print cards that make this even more interesting. So, I'm a fan of the bird. Moving on to Priest, we have Defias Leper, 2-mana 3/2 Pirate, with Battlecry. If you're holding a Shadow spell, deal 2 damage. So, yeah, this is just a really strong card. 2-mana 3/2, deal 2 damage. We've seen the, like the Shaman Murloc. This card is really good. It's just a matter of Murloc Shaman not really being a thing. And that's kind of an issue for this card as well, because Shadow Priest isn't really a thing anymore, right? They basically removed Lucia from the game, and that deck kind of just died. But if that deck does exist, you very easily just play Defias Leper in it. But I don't think Defias Leper is good enough to really make people play Shadow Priest. And even in Shadow Priest, this card, like, it's definitely good enough to play, but it's probably not as consistent as you would hope for. You're going to be playing Raised Dead, and maybe Void Shard. There just aren't that many good Shadow spells you want to be playing in your Defias Leper deck, I don't think. Maybe for more consistency, you can play Thrive in Shadows. I guess people do play this card because of Mancrick. You can draw them consistently with Twilight Deceptor as well. So maybe there is enough support for the Defias Leper. But that pretty much depends on aggro Shadow Priest being a thing, which currently I don't think it will be. Next for Priest, we have Amulet of Undying. 3 mana with tradable. Resurrect 1 friendly Death Rattle minion, and it upgrades when traded. So you draw this, it says resurrect 1 friendly Death Rattle minion, you trade it and then draw it later and it says resurrect 2 friendly Death Rattle minions. And I assume you can, I assume this can go all the way up to resurrect 7 Death Rattle minions. The problem with that is trading this over and over again is going to be really slow. Because you do have to, you know, shuffle it into your, say, 22 card deck and then draw it again. And then shuffle it into your 20 card deck and draw it again. But you don't actually need this to be like 7 minions for it to be strong. Depending on what you're reviving, it's strong at 1. And even just getting it up to 2, it's potentially really good. And Priest can actually pretty easily offset the like slowness of this card. With the Leper, we talked about Twilight Deceptor and Thrive in Shadows. Those are both pretty easy ways to pull this out of your deck, trade it, pull it back out of your deck, trade it, and get this pumped up to resurrecting 2, 3, 4 Death Rattle minions. There's also, if you're low on spells, you could also play Devout Dungeoneer. So maybe a lot of ways to abuse this. It's really just a matter of what Death Rattle minions are there to resurrect with this. Priest doesn't have that many Death Rattle minions, but they do have Light Shower Elemental, which is a really insane Death Rattle minion. I guess maybe there's like an aggro angle where you can play it with Shadowed Spirit, but that seems kinda sketchy. I think more likely you want to play it in some sort of big Priest deck, where your Death Rattle minions are like Scrapyard Colossus, Forge Fiend, the Light Shower Elemental that we mentioned. And in that case, I mean, this card is really insanely good value. We've seen a few Priest cards like this, and they tend to be really strong if they are given the opportunity to be played. I guess if we're concerned about Moarg, Forge Fiend, Scrapyard Colossus, I don't know that there are really very many ways to cheat them out, so that makes this card pretty slow. But in that deck, you're probably also playing Talon. That's a nice like mid-game thing that you can use this with. You can also play something cheap like Death's Head Cultist. Not insane if it's just a 3-mana Death's Head Cultist, but if it's 3 mana for 2 Death's Head Cultists, then suddenly it's a very good card. So yeah, it's something with a lot of potential. There's not a current priest deck that this just easily slots into. And unless the meta changes pretty radically, I think it'll be hard for this to find a home. But it is a powerful card that definitely could see play. Moving on to Rogue, we have the Blackwater Cutlass. 1 mana 2/2 with tradable. After you trade this, reduce the cost of a spell in your hand by 1. Well, I mean, this is obviously just a good card. Tradable cards tend to be good. For some reason, this is baseline a 1 mana 2/2 weapon. And then it has another effect on top of that that reduces the cost of your spells. So, good card. I think this very easily could have been a 2/1, but let's just power creep it, because why not? So, the most popular rogue deck at the moment is Garrote Rogue, which probably does appreciate the card draw, and it does somewhat appreciate the mana discounts. Get like a 0 mana Brain Freeze, makes it easier to play with Field Contact. Drop your Shroud of Concealment down to 2 mana, just makes it easier to play, or it means you can prep it out for 0. But like in general, this deck doesn't play that many spells, and it's kind of hard to figure out what we are cutting for the Blackwater Cutlass. Like, we don't really care that much about the weapon being able to deal like 2 or 4 damage. It doesn't have any synergy with the Field Contact. 2 of the spells we already play don't even care about this discount. So it is a little bit weird, but it is such a powerful card, it's kind of hard to imagine it not seeing play at all. But it's hard to fit in this deck. You're obviously not playing it in the, like, Swine Tusk Shank deck. I don't think. Maybe you do play it in that deck because that deck is so spell heavy. Maybe you just don't care at all about it being a weapon and you just trade it and discount your spells. Moving on to Shaman, we have yet another bird, the Brilliant Macaw. 3 mana 3/3 beast with Battle Cry. Repeat the last Battle Cry you played. So once again, it does not say this turn, it's simply the last battle cry you played. Shaman obviously does have access to a lot of strong battle cries, but I think a lot of them are just like not super impressive with this card. Like even something really strong like Cage Match Custodian, weapons like take time to use, right? So drawing a second weapon doesn't tend to be super powerful. Arid Stormer is a good Battlecry minion, but 2/5 is much better for Rush Wind Fury than a 3/3 is, but, you know, could be okay with something like that. Definitely good with Primal Dungeoneer, definitely good with Granite Forgeborn, which apparently I only have 1 copy of. But it doesn't seem like Shaman really has anything big and scary to use with this. I'm pretty sure you don't get to choose the target if this copies something like Fire Elemental. So, that makes it quite a bit less good, I would say. There are definitely some neutral minions this could be powerful with as well, though. Even just, like, curving this after a Wand Maker is, like, pretty okay, I guess. You can play 3 Man-Cricks in your deck now, that's pretty sick. 3 copies of Kazakus, that could be a thing, I suppose. Mutanus does seem like it could be pretty good. A lot of the problem with Mutanus in general is just that you get 1 shot to break your opponent's combo, and if you don't break it, you probably just inevitably lose to that combo. But with the Brilliant Macaw, you get 3 shots, and then suddenly Mutanus isn't really that random. It's a consistent counter to something like, I don't know, Bolner plus Yashiraj, or maybe even some sort of quest reward if you can pressure them enough that they can't play at the turn they draw it. And also in this Mutanus deck, you can play the Macaw alongside, like, maybe your own Yashiraj, play it alongside Yogg-Saron, so you can play triple Yogg. I think something that actually could be good is playing this in a Cthulhu deck. A lot of the problem with Cthulhu is that sometimes you play it and it like clears your opponent's board and leaves them at like 8 health and you can't really win the game. But if you can play triple Cthulhu in your deck, that's definitely a solid win condition. Now, obviously the problem with that is that it's completely unviable in this meta because it's way too slow. But it is something to keep an eye on, I would say. Overall, though, there definitely are some like really powerful things we can do with the Brilliant Macaw, but it doesn't really feel like any of it fits in the meta at the moment, and I don't think you just slot this into even like Quest Shaman or Elemental Shaman, even if they do play Battle Cries. So at the moment, I don't love this card's chances, but it definitely will be played at some point. On to Warlock, we have Shadowblade Slinger, 1 mana 2/1 pirate with Battle Cry. If you've taken damage this turn, deal that much damage to an enemy minion. So very reminiscent of Prize Plunderer for Rogue, and Prize Plunderer is a very good card, so pretty good sign for Shadowblade Slinger. The main difference between these two cards, though, is Rogue needs the removal, and Warlock really does not. Playable Warlock decks are just straight up like 50% removal because they have so many good cheap removals. And I don't know that this really takes the place of any of them. I think the most likely spot for this card to be good is actually in some sort of zoo deck. Something that plays, you know, Flame Imps, plays Bloodbound Imp. Something like that would be a really, really good spot for the Shadowblade Slinger. Just a cheap minion that establishes board control. That's what Zoo really cares about. But as far as I know, Zoo at the moment is pretty far from being playable. While this card is good, I don't think it makes Zoo playable. So, may or may not see play. I think it probably doesn't make the cut in a deck that plays something like Touch of the Nathrezim or Drain Soul. But it is a good card. Next up for Warlock, we have Wicked Shipment. 1 mana tradable, summon 2 1/1 imps, upgrade by 2 when traded. So I assume when you trade this and draw it again, it summons 4 imps, and then it summons 6, and then caps out at 7, I suppose. So, I mean, we have seen Lost in the Jungle. That's a Paladin card that saw plenty of play. But I think this card probably just isn't quite as good in Warlock as it would be in Paladin. I mean, we do have like Wicked Whispers to take advantage of the tokens. I guess Ritual of Doom is a way to take advantage of the tokens as well. But even if Zoo makes a comeback, I can't really imagine it being super token focused, which is what this card would need to be relevant. And in a Zoo deck, I think the tradable upgrade on this card is like almost irrelevant. Because if I'm playing Zoo and I have 1 mana make 2 minions in my hand, the only way I'm ever trading that card is if it's like turn 5 and it's my only card. And once I've reached that point in the game, like even if I trade this and redraw it immediately, just like 4 imps aren't going to matter. So I feel like the upgrade on this is like almost irrelevant. And as just 1 mana summon 2 1/1s, it's not that exciting, I would say. Darkest Hour is not in standard, right? But like even in a Darkest Hour deck, it's like you hit this off the mulligan, do you trade it on turn 1 and then just hope that you draw it again by turn 6 or whatever? I just don't like this card. I don't really see the home for it. Moving on to Warrior, we have Man the Cannons. 2 mana, deal 3 damage to a minion and 1 damage to all other minions. So sort of like a swipe, but instead of costing 4 mana, it costs half of that. And it only does 3 damage to a single target instead of 4, and it also damages your minions. But, I mean, damaging your minions isn't... One, it's probably just not a big deal, because if you're playing this sort of card, you're probably Control Warrior, and you just very likely don't have a board. Even if you do have a board, you probably don't really care about it. And if you do care about it, then like maybe it's Armor Smith, in which case damaging your own minions is an upside. So yeah, I mean, it just seems like a pretty solid removal for the warrior class. The only real issue with it, I would say, is that warrior already has a lot of good cheap removal. Is this really going to replace any of it? Like, I think Minefield is probably a better card. Blade Storm is maybe a better card. And also it's just kind of a matter of, is a Whirlwind effect good in the meta? Are people going to be playing the Imp card that I just said was bad? If so, then Man the Cannons looks a lot better. But if your Whirlwind effect is just hitting like aggro Druid, then maybe it's not that good. Although dealing 3 damage to a single target in aggro Druid is probably pretty good. So yeah, seems like a fine card. Probably just a control warrior card unless you're playing like Warsong Envoy or something. But yeah, seems cool. Next we have Defias Cannoneer. 3 mana 3/3 pirate. After your hero attacks, deal 2 damage to a random enemy twice. That's a pretty good effect on this card. Attack with your hero, deal 4 damage either to minions or even just to your opponent's face. That's very powerful. And also this is a pirate. We've seen a lot of random pirates in the set so far, and I didn't really mention any of it because it didn't matter. But for the warrior class, pirates actually do matter because of Raid the Docks. And in a Raid the Docks deck, I could see this card seeing play. I do think it's a little weird because, like, pre-quest, you're not super likely to have a weapon. Like, if you're just playing this card on turn 3, it's probably just a 3/3 to contribute toward your quest line. But if you play it a little later than that, you can have Reaper's Scythe or Sword Eater. Those are pretty good. And then, obviously, after you finish the quest, you very consistently have a weapon. And this can maybe help you finish the game. Post-quest, though, I don't know that you really need the help from this card, because your weapon and your cannon shots probably should be finishing the game anyway. But maybe this kills your opponent like 1 turn earlier than they otherwise would. And, you know, that's pretty good. Maybe an extra turn that they can't cycle through their deck and find 4 copies of Ignite or something. Could be nice. The only real issue with this card is finding deck slots for it. And I think we can maybe do that. You probably don't want to cut any of your cheap pirates in something like this, which is a more aggressive pirate deck. But I could see Defias Cannoneer maybe being better than like Stonemull Anchorman or even South Sea Captain. And maybe even in a more control-oriented Pirate Warrior could find a deck slot as well. I don't think the card's incredible. If you compare it to something like Ship's Cannon or even Flamewaker, you're very likely only getting 1 usage out of this per turn compared to those cards, which can go off a lot. But it's still a significant amount of damage on a reasonably statted card, so definitely could see a little bit of play. And then the final card for this video is a neutral card, Golakka Glutton. 3 mana 2/3 pirate with Battlecry, destroy a beast and gain +1/+1. So obviously this is a callback to Golakka Crawler, which destroyed a pirate to gain +1/+1. So this destroys the Golakka Crawler and gains +1/+1. Golakka Crawler was a very good card for part of the time it was in Standard, but I can't really imagine the Glutton seeing too much play. Golakka Crawler was a 2 mana 2/3 on its own. This is a 3 mana 2/3, so pretty bad stat line on its own. And also, I just don't think there are really that many beasts in the meta that you are concerned with killing with this card. And even if you hit like a Wolpertinger or something, it's just not that good. So yeah, I think it's just more of a like fun flavor card, callback to an old card that many of us remember, more so than a card that people are going to actually put into decks. But they did print a lot of parrots in this set. Maybe you need to eat some parrots.